This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road, Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'm going to start off today with a little bit of fun facts. I received an email last week from the person who runs my website. And of course, they were giving us tips and techniques for branding our businesses. And I just thought it was interesting. So I thought I was going to share this with everyone. It was something I definitely didn't know myself. But it says the psychology of color selection. Before diving into the process of choosing colors for your brand, it's important to understand the psychology behind different colors. Each color evokes a specific emotions and associations, making it crucial to align your color choices with your brand's values and intended messages. Now, I chose my color simply because I find it to be pleasing. It is not my favorite color, but it is a color that I do find associated in my life. And I had been commonly told that that color was aligned with communication. No joke. Here I am talking on live TV. At any rate, some of the color selections that they chose to highlight was red. The color exudes passion, energy, and excitement. It's often associated with action, urgency, and strong emotions. Brands like Coca-Cola and Netflix utilize red to capture attention and create a sense of dynamism. Yellow, a color associated with happiness, optimism, and creativity. Brands like McDonald's and IKEA incorporate yellow to create a sense of warmth and approachability. Green, symbolizing growth, health, and nature. Green is often used by brands that focus on sustainability and well-being. Companies like Starbucks and Whole Foods embrace green to communicate their commitment to the environment. Purple, which happens to be my favorite color, albeit there is a hue of it in some of my branding. It is not my chosen color for my business, but it is associated with luxury, sophistication, and creativity. Purple appeals to audiences seeking elegance and uniqueness. Cadbury and Hallmark are examples of brands that utilize purple to convey a sense of opulence. Orange, radiating enthusiasm and energy, and most people would probably find that one associated with me, but it's just not a color that I enjoy. Orange is often used to convey friendliness and enthusiasm. Brands like Fanta and Nickelodeon incorporate orange to create a playful and approachable image. And that brings us to the last color, which is blue, and happens to be the color that I have chosen, obviously. Oh, we can't see that, for my branding. In fact, my office is the same colors as my business card and my magnets on my car. Pretty much everything I have branded with blue. And blue is trust, reliability, and professionalism are often linked to blue. It also evokes feelings of calmness and serenity. Tech giants like IBM and social media platforms like Facebook employ blue to convey stability and dependability. Now, we could kind of have our own little debate on whether or not dependability is something we can rely on from Facebook, but either way, I just thought those were some fun facts. Let's get back to the show now. At this point, we have Nolan Del Campo with us here today. Please welcome Nolan.
Good morning.
How did your week go?
Oh, it was productive. Busy.
Yeah. Juan and I were talking about how we lost time and days this last week. Everything was just spinning.
Yeah, I had a good deadline on Wednesday, but I met it.
Oh, nice. We don't like deadlines, that's for sure. I do have a case that I'm supposed to be walking into the FBI's office, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that just yet, but maybe we can talk after the show about that one.
Okay.
I did find some research. We were talking last week, or I think the week before, in regards to the Tate murders and Charlie Manson and some of his affiliations with Scientology. I did find an article that mentioned, and it was a December 10th, 1969 Los Angeles Times article that made a connection between Charles Manson and the Church of Scientology, saying that Manson was known to have dabbled in Scientology. And I had remembered that a Scientology e-meter was found during a Spawn Ranch raid on August 16th of 1969. But isn't Spawn Ranch also known to have been owned by Scientology?
I don't recall. Maybe at some point
Where the Manson family was staying?
they lived there on and off for about 2 years.
Gotcha. So it's likely that law enforcement knew Manson had knowledge of Scientology early after being charged with the Tate and LaBianca murders due to the things that they found in the home. But if that is a property that is owned by Scientology, that apparatus could likely have been there because that's what they dabble in, right? I mean,
Well,
it doesn't necessarily mean
Manson was exposed to Scientology in prison, and a couple of his buddies were big into Scientology. So he picked up a lot of the teachings and actually used some of their tenets and some of their methodology in when he was dealing with his family. And then I guess a lot of coming through and runaways and this and that coming through. Everybody was looking for something back then. I guess we still are, as far as, you know, the meaning of life and things like that. So a lot of people were dabbling in things like Scientology back then.
Well, we are going to be looking at some more murders today, hopefully, in regards to the Manson family. And of course, there are more relations at that point in regards to Scientology. So we'll go that direction here shortly. Oh, let me get my... There we go. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and throw up the presentation at this point. Based on Zodiac's tally of this last letter that we just completed with Harriet. Do we have that presentation up? Hello.
Not seeing it.
Oh, there it is. All right. So based on the Zodiac's tally in the last letter that we have just been discussing for the last couple weeks, he claimed 7 victims with one unknown in August of 1969. So he knows that 2 survived from the attacks of the 7 that we have allocated to the Zodiac. So we are technically looking for possibly 2 victims in either August or 1 in August and 1 in another one of the months that have been listed. And he listed December. We're going to presume that that is 1968, even though he is not listing any type of year with this. And then July, August, and September and October to mean 1969. So I went to work this last week trying to see if I couldn't figure out who those were. I did initially had the list up here of Stuart Mayer, who worked for the railroad. He was the accountant that was killed in San Francisco. I thought was a possibility. I've struck through that because he was killed in March of 68, and it does not conform with what the Zodiac has said. Now, keep in mind that I do believe that the Zodiac bifurcates his series of killings. So as he's giving us tally in this count here in Northern California, he is not recognizing any murders like Sherry Jo Bates or anything else. And we know it isn't until he writes the LA Times much later when he claims 17 victims that he states that you guys stumbled across my Riverside activity, in which case he is meaning Sherry Jo Bates. And he states that there are a hell of a lot more down there. So that would conclude my assertion that he is treating different areas of kills as different, as separate from his work as the Zodiac. So I also had Richard Chartrand in South Lake Tahoe that was killed in August of 1968. So August is only fitting, even though the year is not fitting. So if he is running this in order of 1968 to 1969, we may very well be able to rule out Richard Chartrand as well, leaving with us the original 5 individuals that we believe that he had indicated he had killed, and Paul Stein, in which he provided proof, along with the logistics of all the other kills. In his letter, he states that I shall no longer announce to anyone when I commit my murders. They shall look like routine robberies, killings of anger, and a few fake accidents, etc. So I thought we'd kind of just dive into some of those. I had been... What's that?
On your list, I think I see a little mistake on your list. It's on the date of David Faraday. I think he was with Betty Lou Jensen, and it was Michaud that was with Darlene Ferrin. Of course, he's not on the list because he didn't die. But Faraday would have been killed in.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. December. December. All right. So I'll make myself a note to make the change on that. I had the wrong name in there. I had Mike Mageau in there for some reason, and I had taken that out, but I clearly didn't pay attention to the dates. Although we still have the correct 5 victims that are in there, I do need to change the date of Faraday. Okay. So I have been working with somebody named Moonlight, who has been passing on information in regards to missing and unidentified remains. Of course, I don't think she realizes how important she is to this, but she is really getting fed up with all the different stories, she says, and she doesn't really want to work on these things anymore. I understand. I've been doing this for almost 15 years. It's a complicated series of events to sort and sift through the lies and the made up and false accusations or these individuals. Though she, I have found out just recently, definitely has an agenda, and she definitely has individuals involved, and she believes that Jack's actually involved with them. Now, she found a body on August 30th of 1969 of a white male who has not been identified. He was located in Mill Valley, California. Estimated age range was between 20 and 50 years. They believed that he had been there for at least a month. There wasn't a lot that they could tell from the body because it was so decomposed, but the subject was found hanging from a tree on Ridge Coast Road on Mount Tamalpais. Now, Mount Tam is listed on the murder map that Sandy Betts gave me. Moonlight believes that this was likely something that was created by law enforcement, noting all of the unsolved or missing or unidentified bodies, and that the possibility that Sandy Betts had been dating cops meant that one of these cops could have been the person to have dropped this by for her to look at. Either way, this guy's hair was colored gray or partially gray. He was wearing a black sweater. There were pants on the body. Clothing was a light blue shirt near the body with eyeglasses that were Bausch & Lomb frame, Burbank with rose-tinted prescription lenses. They even note the actual, I guess it's going to be the specifics for each lens from the left to the right eye. And maybe that will set somebody on a path to figuring out who this individual was if they knew what their loved one wore for glasses. Either way, there was also, this was done in Marin County, and we do have the identification of victims in Marin County. Circumstances of the recovery said that at 10:59 p.m., a park ranger at the Pantole Ranger Station on Mount Tamalpais alerted police after a young person reported finding a man hanging from a tree branch. Deputies discovered the decomposing body of a middle-aged man hanging from a 15-foot high tree branch about a quarter mile from Ridgecrest Road. The man made a noose with 4 strands. Now, they're assuming at this point that this is a suicide, but she's given it to us because there are some strange oddities. The man made a noose with 4 strands of rope, which he tied together. The noose itself was intricate with 3 loops around the neck and 3 loops around the tree branch, and wire used to fasten the loops together before jumping from the branch. So they assumed that he jumped this is where it gets funny, Nolan. Before jumping from the branch. So this means this man had to climb up to the branch. He apparently used his sweater to tie his hands behind his back to prevent him from trying to remove the noose. A knife, which was likely used to cut the rope, was found stuck in the tree about the branch, and a light blue shirt was also found in the tree. So the man carried no identification and left no note, but there was $190 in cash and a receipt from a Mill Valley hardware store for wire, clothesline, and a special knife that was found inside his shirt pocket. Authorities estimate he had been dead for about a month. So this is going to be an August murder, basically, or a possibility of an August murder by rope for the Zodiac. Inventory of remains, there's no answer in regards to it, and condition of the remains were not recognizable due to decomposing and putrefaction. I find it interesting, though, that he could tie his hands behind his back. I mean, clearly then he would have had to have climbed the tree, tied his hands behind his back, and then jumped to his death. My concern there is that we know that a sweater tends to have a whole heck of a lot of give in it. And how tight could you?
That doesn't seem plausible that it happened that way. That he tried to someone else had to be involved.
Well, and to a degree where he couldn't have fought it or pulled his own hands out, that's what I question. Because like I said, a sweater has a lot of give in it.
And then they find a knife in the tree, but they also find a knife on him. And then
Right.
also the receipt. If I'm a detective or a cop, first place I go is that Millville hardware store and check the date on the receipt, and then just ask what people have come in here on that date and bought these things. And they could narrow it down right away.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, if you paid for cash, I mean, at least they would be able to identify, and maybe whoever was working that day during that time frame might have had an idea of who it was that showed up to purchase that stuff. There was no information on that, so I don't know how far the authorities took it, since they considered it to be a suicide. That also leaves August 4th, 1969. We talked about this one before, which was a Jane Doe in Lompoc down south. Again, this doesn't really play into the Zodiac's tally for Northern California, because, like I said, he wasn't introducing the fact that he had killed anybody anywhere else in any of his letters. So I'm not quite sure that this individual, I'm not saying that it isn't a Zodiac victim. It happens to be down in Gaviota. It happens to be in that lower area. It's near Vandenberg Air Force Base. It does have some things that are consistent with Dominguez and Edwards that were killed back in 1963. But we've already covered this, so I just wanted to mention this was a possibility for that August kill if the Zodiac was if the Zodiac was including in his tally anything outside of Northern California. That brings us to what Moonlight believes. She believes there are 4 people involved, and that she wasn't able to make the connections and put everything together until she had found my podcast and heard about Jack Terrence. She said once she started putting that together, seeing where Jack was, how he moved about, the proximity to other serial killing sprees, she said then it became very apparent that she believed that he was part of a group of 4 people, and that would have included Fred Manali, Richard Anderson, and Ed Edwards. Have you ever heard of these names, Nolan?
I have not.
I haven't either. So she has a very interestingly spun story, but she also found another set of Lover Lane's murders, August 10th of 1969. They appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle on August 12th, and it was in Melbourne Beach, Florida. Very, very much Zodiac. Again, it's out of state. I don't know if that meets the criteria, but it would be the missing 2 people that we were looking for. And it would be in the month of August. So it would fit with his tally if he was claiming to have killed 7 people. I'm not sure if that necessarily means they all had to be in California. Again, the slayings, the girl was riddled with bullets. So a pretty teenager found slain with her boyfriend at a Lover's Lane just south of here was shot 17 times, apparently while her bound companion looked on. I don't know how they get to that conclusion. Looked on like he what? Yeah, like nobody was there. You don't know what he was doing. But it says authorities said yesterday. Brevard County Sheriff Lee Wilson said Connie Ballard, a slender 17-year-old brunette, had been shot 17 times, all in front between the head and the knees with a .22 caliber pistol. It says we haven't done an official autopsy, he said, but it doesn't appear she was sexually assaulted. We haven't established a motive. So again, that brings us right back to Zodiac methods. The sheriff said there were no arrests had been made. The bodies of the girl and her boyfriend, George P. Martin Jr., 19, were found Sunday evening at the end of a dirt road in a heavily wooded area between the ocean and the Indian River, about 12 miles south of here. Inside the auto on the rear floorboard, they found Martin in a kneeling position with his hands tied behind his back and his feet bound. He had been shot 3 times in the head, the officer said. So we are looking at them being bound, just like Lake Berryessa. We are looking at them being shot, just like the Lake Herman and the Blue Rock Springs murders. So it is very, very Zodiac-esque. It is in a Lover's Lane area, and there's overkill on the woman. Now, that's what led me back to how do they know that her companion was looking on, because he's found in the back, bound and shot 3 times. Who's to say that that didn't occur previous to her being shot? Either way, very, very much like Zodiac. And I did say that there was a possibility that Jack had relations to a Florida murder way back in 1946 on Dania Beach. So again, that one was also a Lover's Lane murder, which Dennis contended that Jack had committed the Texarkana Phantom murders. They had arrested somebody in regards to the murders. So this is why Jack went and committed this crime in Florida, to show them that they didn't have the right person. And that sounds like the Zodiac as well. He wants to give proof that that individual you've got is not the right person. He said it in Black Dahlia. He said it in many of these crime sprees. Let's see. Moonlight also found a few more people that I'm backing up, obviously, to 1966, but there was a Jeffrey Lynn Cullimore in July 16th of 1966 who left his post at Fort Irwin with his lieutenant to look for rocks in the desert. The vehicle they were in was later located abandoned, and his lieutenant was found deceased nearby. Jeffrey has not been located despite searches in the area. You know who that sounded like to me was Paul Whitkey. Do you remember that one?
I don't know Paul Whitkey.
Whitkey. He left his base in California and then ended up his car was found, and I don't know if he was ever found in the Mojave Desert. So we talked or discussed about that, I think, back in the early 1960s. But similar situation where they go to the desert, the car's found, and the individual's not. Either way, Moonlight also made an extremely interesting find, and I'm going to kind of go over this real quick, and then we're going to play an audio of what the family had to say. At this point, it says, burned. Overview of a 1966 Yolo County John Doe, unidentified person, male, uncertain date. The body was actually found on November 8th of 1966 in Clarksburg, California. Remains discovered in a burned cabin at the John Holmes Ranch in Clarksburg, California. The labor camp manager indicated that a Luis Martinez was known to be living in the cabin at the time of the fire. Martinez, described as 5'3", 130 pounds, black hair, social security number unavailable. Place of birth is Texas. Toxicology showed that his blood alcohol level was 0.38 and the CO was 64% saturation. So that to me sounds like he might have died in the fire. He was still alive when maybe that fire was set. So who knows if he was knocked out or what kept him subdued inside of a burning building. But it looks to me that CO saturation is that he was inhaling that smoke. Blood type was O. Unable to make a positive ID and no known family per labor camp manager, possibly resided on 2nd Street in Sacramento, California. So this puts him back into the area of where Jack is running around. And we're going to see that in these next couple letters because we start to see letters mailed out of Sacramento. He's working for the wine region in Clarksburg, for the community formerly of its name in El Dorado County, see Clarksville, California. Clarksburg, formerly Clarksburg, is a census-designated place in Yolo County, California. It is located on the Sacramento River in the extreme southeastern corner of the county, and it lies at an elevation of 10 feet. That's all. Anyways, let's get to what really matters here. We played the Dennis Kaufman Zodiac, the real story, and we're going to play a clip right now of the family members talking about a particular situation, and I wanted everybody to hear this. So let's go ahead and play that clip.
Had burned a man alive in the cabin.
Now, what kind of statement is that?
That was after he told me that him and Denny had killed that man in that cabin. So this is a story he told me him and Denny had done together in Northern California. Had burned a man alive in the cabin.
Wow, you guys, I just got goosebumps. Extremely interesting statement to hear the family make, and then to have Moonlight find a man that was burned alive in a cabin fitting that very description. Oh, how's that make you feel, Nolan?
Clarksburg is not far from Sacramento either. It's
no.
It's right across.
It says it's Yolo County.
Yeah.
And if he was legitimately living, I mean, he must have been there, obviously picking grapes, because that's what they're talking about, is that he's in wine country. He may be living in that cabin and working as, one of those migrant workers that he's Hispanic, and they tend to follow wherever the crops are being pulled at the time. So that makes kind of sense that if he's living in Sacramento and he's following the wine or the wine and grape harvest, that he would be there working as a migrant worker. But the key thing being here is obviously we have a match in a unidentified, unsolved murder of a man being burned alive in a cabin, and we have Jack's family stating, and the person who was talking about that was Rick Larson, that is Jack's son-in-law, who provided some very gory pictures of an individual that had purportedly gotten one of Jack's stepdaughters pregnant at the age of 13, found dead on a railroad track below, where the statement was that he had committed suicide. But if I could show you these pictures, you'd clearly note that this individual did not suffer all of the damage that he had on his body, including the amount of blood that was found on his pants and otherwise, to have just jumped. There's just no way. It looks like he was beaten and likely tossed off the top of this bridge, would be my estimation. And nobody wants to admit to that, because that means that Jack killed him in all likelihood. At any rate, there you go, you guys. There is a firsthand statement and account. So aside from Jack saying, "Let me see what time it is," when asked if he's the Zodiac, or making the statement that he got tired of cutting people's throats, so he hasn't done it in a long time, we have him admitting to the family that him and his son had actually burned a man alive in a cabin. And now we have actual unidentified remains of an unsolved murder of a man being burned alive in a cabin. That takes me on to Douglas Richard Smith. Again, never found. Another person affiliated with the military. That's kind of Moonlight's big connection here. She believes that there's a military connection between all the people that Jack happens to be killing. I don't necessarily, I mean, I can see how there are affiliations through some of these victims' family members that are in the military. So if this is a hit towards that family member that they killed the individual, not all of them were directly related. They were related either familial or otherwise to military. Kind of like Black Dahlia, right? She was not in the military, but she had worked at one of the military bases as a civilian. So there, again, was a military connection. It says that Douglas Smith was an officer in the U.S. Navy stationed with VP-19 at Moffett Field, California. He was last seen on November 28th, 1968, but failed to report for duty on November 26th. His car disappeared at the same time, and he has not been seen or heard from since. I think this kind of wraps up going back into the past about murders. She also sent me a huge new list of victims that are found, some of the, and it states that they're partially nude. There's a lot of information for me to go through in here. Some of these people I actually do have on the podcast, but there are several that I don't, that I'm going to need to look into. And some of them I was actually able to exclude, which we'll show you as well. So these are the comments from Moonlight. So she believes that Deer Lodge, Montana prison, it sounds like Ed Edwards and Jack possibly met there, or that Ed was idolizing the Zodiac Killer. Allegedly, Ed was connected to the mob. Now, Deer Lodge, Montana, if it is correct that that's what Brian Hartnell heard, he had reported, I believe, to Mr. White at the scene when he first came upon Brian Hartnell that it was in Colorado, and then later we see this Deer Lodge, Montana come up, and I think that came out in Grace Smith's book. So really kind of trying to identify where the killer stated that he was out of and what was really going on, but they did not find that there were any guards killed at Deer Lodge, nor had anybody recently escaped, purportedly. She goes on to say that in the cipher decoded by Efron, it names Crabtree, which Darlene's first husband was named Crabtree, and it depicts when this military MK Ultra, her father, Golden Boy, will die in November 1975. Manali is thrown under the bus when KO, the master executioner, brings the Arizona personal belongings of Deborah Carrick back to the hitchhiker body dump site. So she is finding pieces of unidentified remains in grave sites with other bodies that were known to be from the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. This particular motive of operation is actually kind of identical to what we've seen in the I-45 killings, because we found, they found, should I say, that there were extra hands or skulls or pieces of another person's body buried in the same grave as a full body. So that means that there's cross connections, or they are crossing over with these unidentified remains, hoping that they don't get linked back to the original state they came from. So I think in some cases, for some of these missing victims that we have here from California, they might be looking to those graves in the I-45 killings to see if any of those match with unidentified or missing murders that occurred from California, or certainly any other state, such as Arizona, as she mentions here. It says Minnelli, aka the Imperial 1976, and Anderson both commit suicide to avoid the consequences for what they have done. Edwards is another MKZK mob. He gets sentenced to Deer Lodge. There are multiple ZK MKs. So she's alluding that there is several people involved in this particular group. In 1976, when Elaine, Secret Service at Mare Island, is about to bring this all up for court-martial, she goes missing. The gun that was stolen from Arizona is planted and staged suicide of another veteran at Mount Veeder. So evidently we'll talk about the Mount Veeder at some point in time. I want to say it's much later in the game, but they found that the gun that was staged at this suicide in Mount Veeder was actually the gun that was stolen, the burglary back in Arizona, in which case this particular individual was killed, Deborah Carrick. Let's see. There are multiple ZK MKs in 1976 when Elaine, Secret Service at Mare Island, is about to bring this all up for court-martial. She goes missing. The gun that was stolen from Arizona is planted and staged suicide of another veteran at Mount Veeder. Mount Veeder man, or Napa John Doe, was an adult male discovered in California in 1997. He is believed to be deceased for several years prior to his discovery, and his death may have occurred as early as 1980. Now, that's where it gets interesting, because both Minnelli and Anderson have died by 1975, 1976, I believe. So if this man's not killed until 1980 using a gun that came from a robbery out of Arizona, she claims that other individuals brought it back, but we know that Jack is notoriously traveling through back and forth from California to Texas and going through Arizona. So it would be interesting to see where this Carrick, I'm going to have to do some more research on it, find out where she was living and see if that was en route for Jack from going back and forth from California to Texas. It says he is believed to be deceased for several years, since 1980. His cause of death was a gunshot. However, authorities do not know if it was due to homicide or suicide. Then there is the Sherman's military family traveling to California, also murdered where Deborah Carrick was murdered. So she's made some interesting connections with these individuals, and I think they kind of play right into what's going on, albeit they may not have any relation to Minnelli or to Edwards. And I started to do some checking on those as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. There was she also said there was a personal ad put in San Francisco Chronicle referencing Zodiac and a partner. So this is where she's coming up with this group theory. And the personal ad states, Zodiac, your partner is in deep real estate. You're next. The Imperial Wizard can save you. Surrender to him or I'll terminate your case. R.A. Huh. This was actually placed August 27th, or this article was from August 27th, 1976 in the San Francisco Chronicle. Richard Anderson, Fred Minnelli, the Imperial Wizard. This article cites two people, Richard Anderson, which conceivably the RA at the end of this could very well actually stand for RA, and Fred Minnelli. Anderson was questioned multiple times and eventually killed himself. Minnelli also worked at San Quentin as an English teacher. Fred Minnelli took LSD while working at San Quentin prison. Now, these are all, again, this is somebody else's words. It's nothing that I could prove or state. Somebody has looked this up and stated this. According to Siegel, who got the information from his sister, Minnelli worked at San Quentin as part of some experiments. We do know that MK Ultra was not just in colleges and the military, that they were using them in prisons and in psychiatric type facilities, such as the one in Canada that we've talked about previous. Both staff and prisoners were asked to volunteer, and it appears Minnelli did so. When it was deciphered, part of the reveal read Slaves in Paradise. Now, I did look at Minnelli's stuff, and he does talk about Slaves in Paradise, but he spells it correctly. It's not incorrectly spelled. And about this time, Minnelli had a short story published entitled Paradise, It's a Nice Place. So this is how they're trying to clump Minnelli as the Zodiac Killer. Both Minnelli and Zodiac connect the TH in their writings. I took a look at the writings, but Last but certainly not least of all was a personal ad that ran in the Zodiac's favorite newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle. So it says that Fred Manali in 1976 was killed when he swerved head-on into oncoming traffic. It indicates he'd lost control of his car and collided with another vehicle. The very next day, that's when this ad was supposed to have been posted, or at least if you read this online, that's what you will hear. I did do some digging, and I did find some individuals who were able to source this particular ad, and that they believe the ad was placed a day or so before the actual death of Fred Manali, in which case they believed that it was not necessarily meant for Fred Manali, or at least this could have been predicting that Fred Manali was about to take a turn for the worse. We know that the Zodiac claimed he was going to make them look like fake accidents, so if he manipulated the vehicle in some way to cause Fred to lose control, either way, they found some, let's see, I thought it could be a likely patsy. Fred Manali and Ed Edwards possibly being a patsy, and the fake clues the Zodiac talked about. They found drawings in Manali's belongings. One of them was of Kim Allen, one of the believed Santa Rosa hitchhiker murder victims. And what I thought that crossed reference to was the 1976-77 Oakland County child killers Chris Bush suspect, where he was believed to have been suicided. We're going to get to that in the future, but he also had a drawing of one of the victims, Mark Stebbins, found in his belongings afterwards, though they could not make any connection to Mark's from Chris Bush to the children that were being killed there. Moonlight believes that Jack knew and worked with these individuals, and then Richard Anderson, of course, commits suicide. Fred Manali writes with a leftward slant. So you guys, I did take a look at his handwriting. I looked at what they had on the internet. This leftward slant is definitely nothing that is seen in the Zodiac's handwriting. In fact, when he attempts to make that leftward slant, all of the writing is completely awkward, and he has a far, if not extreme, very extreme rightward slant, in which case some of the letters are falling over to the right. So we are definitely dealing with different individuals. Manali is not the author of these letters. And of course, it's quite the opposite, or should I say, this coupled with the significant differences in the handwriting characteristics, I have labeled him as not the author of the Zodiac letters. Now, Frederick Manali, 41-year-old Santa Rosa Junior College creative writing instructor. So he's creatively writing things, and he's talking about paradise. I don't know how that they can conceivably put him in play as the Zodiac Killer, because he obviously has a full-time job he has to go to every day. And I just don't see that as a possibility for the Zodiac. It says the 1976 death in a head-on collision on Highway 12, which is the Napa area, sadomasochistic drawings he had created depicting a former student. Kim Wendy Allen was a former student, they were trying to say, who was one of the victims that were discovered among the writing or the drawing was discovered among his belongings. So was Manali in an accident, as the report states, or did he really lose control of his car and have a head-on collision? Claims that the drawing of Kim Allen found in the belongings, again, making it look like a suicide and possibly pinning things on him, is right up the alley with Arthur Lee Allen and many other people in this saga. This could have been the work of the Zodiac. I'm just saying, really, fake accidents, fake clues. And we also have some information that the Blood Alley, which was Highway 37, it's a piece of highway in between Vallejo and Novato, passes by Hamilton Air Force Base. And during the late 60s, there were a lot of head-on collisions that were occurring during this time frame. Anonymous. I did receive a piece of information from somebody who was a student of Fred Manali's, and they said, I just hope this is not true. This is really hard to handle. I've always been in fear of the Zodiac Killer. How was I spared if I spent time with him, she asks. And then she goes on to say, well, one should keep in mind that there are also some things that doesn't fit so well. Most eyewitnesses describe him as the Zodiac as between 5'8" and 5'10" tall, and a little bit on the chubby side. From what I gathered online, basically, Mr. Manali was about 6'3", tall and rather slim. And even if he acknowledged later that he had gained some weight, he definitely was never the size of the Zodiac. So we have somebody that is speaking out on Manali's behalf. Manali may just very well have been a patsy and gotten himself caught up in the middle of something. People have attempted to connect these to a purported Zodiac Killer communication. The murders of Furlong and Snoozy in San Jose area, but they claimed a fellow student and neighbor was found to be the murderer, and Carl F. Werner confessed and was convicted to these and Kathleen Bielick's murder. So I have removed them from the presentation since we have somebody who is acknowledging, confessing, and taking credit for these crimes. On history.com, I found some interesting summaries of the Zodiac Killer. One says all 187s committed on weekends, all messages sent from SF except one from Pleasanton to LA Times. Envelopes are overposted, stamps are sideways or inverted, misspelled short, simple words apparently on purpose. So again, we have somebody that is actually identifying with the fact that the misspellings were clearly to make them look like they're dumbed down. So if you have somebody who is legitimately having spelling errors and spelling issues in their handwriting, you cannot use that as a comparison towards the Zodiac letters to proclaim that it is the Zodiac, since they misspell or break words in a similar pattern, because we're finding out now, I've said this the entire time, but now here is more proof that this misspelling was done on purpose. May have knowledge of the following: cryptography, meteorology, explosive devices, charts, and terminology of compass, latent fingerprint identification methods. In parentheses, they said concealed fingertips with fingernail polish. That is not true. The Zodiac said it was airplane cement. They are familiar with typewriter identification methods and light opera. This all pretty much describes Jack. Every single one of those categories. And I don't know if they can do this with any other particular fake suspect that they have out there. It says likes publicity, enjoys ridiculing the police, claims to be crack proof. He's an egotist, cultist, slaves for the afterlife. I just think that was a ploy. What do you think, Nolan?
I don't know. It may, who knows? Go either way on that.
Continue with it the entire time. Like, it was a short-lived statement to make them believe. You know, not every single one of his communications referred to slaves and afterlife. Right. It happened a few times. Does not panic
to just give them some sort of cultish motive, you know, to attribute to the Zodiac.
Yeah, to look in the wrong direction, basically. That's pretty much how I feel about it. It isn't long lasting. It doesn't survive enough, and there certainly isn't enough indications that one would expect about knowledge of cults to state or to lead me in that direction. For me, I feel like that is one of the fake ploys to get them looking in the opposite direction. It also says probable source of Zodiac cipher symbols is a book by Archon de Rule, A History of Secret Societies. Zodiac used 3 pairs of matching letters and symbols from the marked list: the reverse F and D, the triangle for the I, and the T for the O. 10 of the symbols were switched by Zodiac to different letters. A dozen others were used with minor variations. Symbols reportedly were secret writing of the highest degrees of the Order of the Illuminati, organized in Bavaria in the late 18th century as an anti-clerical society. Some persons have claimed the Illuminati rule the world from behind the scenes. No comments on the Illuminati?
No.
We don't want to get ourselves in trouble. Well, this actually brings us
already in trouble.
I know, right? This brings us to another set of Manson family murders. The November 21st, 1969 finding of James Sharp and Doreen Gall, the bodies dumped and found in an alley between Arapahoe Street and Magnolia Avenue, Los Angeles, California. Magnolia could be a tie-in because if we go back to the Black Dahlia days, there was the Magnolia murders. That's what one of those sets of female murders were originally notated, because they kept finding magnolia flowers, white magnolia flowers, I believe, on the victims' bodies, which also mimicked another movie, I think the Rose Murders or something like that, where it was a movie where roses were left on the individual bodies of the victims. So I thought that was interesting. We also have Gall's family who lives on Myrtle Street in Albany, New York, near the infamous Albany Medical Center and Albany Veterans Home. And this is actually brought up. Albany Medical Center is actually written about by the Zodiac with a cipher in regards to an upcoming murder he plans on committing. So the August 1st, 1973 letter and cipher that was decoded, though that murder never took place and that individual was not found dead. Father says Gall left in July of 1969 to LA to study Scientology. Again, we've got that Scientologist connection to the Manson family through Bruce Davis, through, I think they're trying to pin the murders of some of the family, Manson family members on Bruce Davis. Is that correct?
Yeah, Bruce Davis was a killer. He was the second in the hierarchy of the family. And he actually looked a lot like Manson. And sometimes people would mistake them for each other.
Well, they indicated that, I'll get to that. I think it's coming up. But so she purportedly, Doreen Gall actually dated Bruce Davis based on some of the information I found.
Because Davis was deep into Scientology. So he may have been a member of the same Scientology outfit in LA that the Gall and the other guy were.
So it says Dave said she knew Davis from John Hott. Do you know who that is?
I don't know who John Hott is, but I think she knew him through the Scientology group.
Right. And well, so Doreen supposedly knew Davis from John Hott and is being said that Gall dated Davis. She was stabbed over 50 times, beaten about the face and head. The Magnolia Street in Los Angeles is another Zodiac Riverside, Los Angeles connection to murders where bodies have been found before. And the Magnolia murders actually occurred from 1943 to 1944, which puts them just slightly earlier than the lipstick killings and Texarkana Phantom murders. But we know that Jack was on the road and in 28 different states by the time he was 17. And I didn't actually start tracking him in murders until he was 17 in Chicago, Illinois, with one possibly back in California, which I believe was Georgette Bauerdorf. Anyways, motive sought and slain of youth, woman, only clue discovered was common membership of pair in Scientology sect. So both of them. Well, Doreen Gall and James Sharp purportedly, I got that one, were killed November 21st. The Albany Times news staffers provided the LA police with details to assist in the identification of Gall. In 73, they talk about a letter that was actually found. Oh, no, this is the Albany, New York. Interesting part is the street that runs along Top Myrtle Avenue is where Doreen Gall and her family lived. So they were giving you kind of just an outlook of where these particular murders and where her family lived in relation to the Albany Medical Center. Let me see here. I think we have a minute or so left. We got started a little bit late, but here is a letter from the Zodiac Killer that was found in Darlene Gall's apartment or room, wherever she happened to be staying at that particular time. It says, "So you think you can fool the old killer? Ha ha." Now, these letter L's that I have marked over here, you guys, we have mapped out once before. These L's were actually noted in the Black Dahlia letters and in a few other letters. They're random. They're there. We're not sure why they're there, but they just seem to be hanging out on the actual communication with no real reason why. Know all your movements and the time they are made. Time is short. So we have that reference to Black Dahlia again, and it was said in the Sherry Jo Bates confession letter. Enjoy life while you can. You are too beautiful to live, and I must kill you. The Zodiac Killer. I also found that his little doodles of blood drops, if you will, with the dots in the center are very similar to what we found on the bleeding knife of the Zodiac. And those are the letters we're going to obviously have to catch up with next week. That's about all I have time for today. Nolan, thank you again for being here. Next week, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to discuss some communications that are I believe are by the Zodiac Killer himself. Everybody have a wonderful weekend and take care.
Bye.
No.